The officiant turned to Makina. "And do you, Makina, take Olafemi as your husband?" Makina hesitated, her silence filling the room. Everyone held their breath. Olafemi started sweating. Zinzi thought, "Please say no, please say no, please." Her parents exchanged worried looks, each thinking, "Oh Lord, please inspire her to say no." The officiant repeated, "Makina, do you take Olafemi as your husband?" After a long pause, she whispered. The guests gasped, disbelief rippling through the room. Olafemi had always been obsessed with fame. Since he was a kid, he'd been fascinated by celebrities on TV, watching them walk red carpets. He imagined his face on billboards, his name trending on social media, crowds of fans begging for his autograph. But as the years went by, that dream felt farther out of reach than ever. It wasn't for lack of trying. Olafemi was undeniably good-looking, with a charming smile, a jawline sharp enough to cut glass, and a natural ease in front of the camera. But his efforts to become famous kept falling flat. He'd tried everything, making funny videos, posting daily selfies, following every social media trend, hoping one would make him go viral. Yet, no matter what he did, his views barely reached beyond his small circle of friends and family. Everyone told him to abandon his dreams of being an influencer and find a real job. Everyone, that is, except for one person, Makina, his friend who was always there to cheer him up and like every post. Makina had been part of Olufemi's life since kindergarten. She was the kind of person who was always there, reliable and loyal, always willing to help him with whatever he needed. Unfortunately, life hadn't been as kind to her as she was to others. Makina was obese due to a health condition she'd been managing since she was a child. Her illness required medication that affected her weight, and no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't escape it. But her weight had never defined her. She was bright, cheerful, a constant source of sunshine. Yet Olufemi didn't truly care about Makina. He kept her as a friend because he knew she'd always be there when he needed her. But deep down, Olufemi wished for a beautiful, glamorous friend instead, like the actresses he saw on TV. What he didn't know was that Makina had been in love with him since they were children. She knew him better than anyone and secretly hoped they'd get married one day. Over the years, her love for him grew, but she never dared speak of it, convinced he'd never see her as more than a friend. One evening, Makina was chatting with her friend Zinzi, telling her once again how much she loved Olufemi and how amazing he was. Tired of hearing the same story, Zinzi finally said, "Makina, I'm tired of hearing you talk about Olufemi without taking any action. If you like him, go tell him before another girl takes your chance." This pushed Makina to take action. "You're right, I'm tired of hiding my feelings. I'll tell him, I'm sure he likes me." She immediately left and ran to Olufemi's house to tell him the truth. When she arrived, she greeted Olufemi's mother, Mrs. Aku, who was busy cooking. Mrs. Aku loved Makina and thought she was a lovely girl. She'd always hoped that her son would end up with her. After chatting with Mrs. Aku, Makina went to the living room where Olufemi sat, looking out of sorts that night. They talked on the couch for an hour, and finally Makina gathered the courage to confess her feelings. Her heart raced, her hands trembled, and her voice was barely above a whisper. "Olufemi, I've been in love with you since we were in kindergarten. I've been hiding it for so long, hoping it would disappear, but it's only grown stronger," she said, looking down, too nervous to see his reaction. Olufemi looked at Makina, and for a moment, he was silent. Then, he let out a laugh, not even bothering to hide his amusement. "Makina, have you seen the type of girls I date?" he said, his tone dismissive. "You'd need to lose a lot of kilograms." Makina's cheeks flushed with embarrassment, tears prickling at her eyes. She wanted to disappear. But Olufemi wasn't finished. Without even a thought for her feelings, he pulled out his phone, snapped a quick selfie of them, and posted it to his social media. The caption read, "My friend Makina wants us to date. What do you think?" The post went up in seconds and comments started flooding in almost immediately. His followers were merciless. "She'd crush you," one person laughed. "Careful, she might eat you for dessert," another wrote. Cruel comment after cruel comment rolled in, each one more hurtful than the last. Makina tried to laugh it off, but as she scrolled through the comments, her heart sank. Each word cut deeper, and she fought back tears, sitting in silence as her heart quietly shattered. Meanwhile, Olafemi didn't care about her pain. His attention was locked on the sudden spike in engagement. He realized that pictures of him, the hot guy, beside Makina, the obese girl, sparked enough contrast to drive up comments and likes. He saw an opportunity and was ready to use this new discovery to his advantage. One evening, Olafemi invited Makina over to his house. He hadn't mentioned that he planned to do a live stream with her, but when she arrived, she noticed his phone propped up on a tripod, ready to stream. Olafemi smiled at her, flashing the same charming face that makes her fall in love. "Come on, let's give the followers what they want," he said, pulling her into the camera's view. The live stream started and viewers poured in. Olafemi was explaining how he and Makina had met, faking a sense of admiration for her. As the viewer numbers climbed and comments filled the screen, Makina felt herself tense up. She tried to ignore the harsh words appearing in real time, but each mocking comment, each punchline about her appearance, pierced her heart a little more. Olafemi, however, stayed in character, laughing along and even reading some of the meaner comments aloud. "Look at this one," he chuckled, pointing at a particularly hurtful comment. "Someone said we're like Beauty and the Beast." He laughed. She forced a smile, swallowing back tears as she felt her spirit fracture under the weight of his words and the audience's ridicule. After the stream ended, Olafemi looked thrilled with the engagement. "That was awesome. People love our vibe, don't you think?" Makina tried to smile but couldn't hide her sadness. "Olafemi, don't you think maybe some of those comments were a bit much?" He rolled his eyes. "Come on, Makina, it's just the internet. People say stupid things. Don't take it so personally." After that evening, Makina began avoiding Olafemi. The humiliation had been too much to bear, and she no longer wanted to see her face on the internet, mocked by strangers who didn't even know that her obesity was due to an illness she had been fighting all her life. Olafemi tried to contact Makina for another live stream, but she didn't pick up. Realizing he needed to win back her trust and keep her hooked, he came up with an evil plan. One day, he invited Makina to a nice restaurant. At first, she wasn't interested, still hurt from the last live stream, but her love for him eventually made her accept. They spent the evening talking, laughing, and reminiscing about childhood memories. Olafemi was attentive, focusing on her, even complimenting her loyalty and kindness. Makina felt hope blossoming again, believing he might actually care about her. Unfortunately, she was delulu and didn't realize he was only manipulating her, so she believed every word he said. Just before leaving, Olafemi's tone turned serious. "Makina, I've been thinking a lot lately," he began. "You've always been there for me no matter what. You supported me when nobody else did, and I've realized how much that means to me. I think I like you too, and I want you to be my girlfriend." Makina's heart skipped a beat. For a moment, she thought she hadn't heard him correctly. She blinked, her mind racing to catch up with his words. You want to be my boyfriend?" she asked, her voice a mix of shock and cautious excitement. Olafemi nodded. "Yeah, I mean, why not? We've been best friends for so long and we know each other better than anyone else. Doesn't it make sense?" Makina's heart swelled with joy, barely able to process it. Despite everything, her love for Olafemi had never faded. And now, Here he was, asking her to be his girlfriend. She accepted, her face flushed with happiness and disbelief. Olafemi seemed pleased, even pulling her in for a quick hug that felt more like a performance than genuine affection. But Makina didn't notice the coldness in his hug, convincing herself that it was simply romantic. After all, Delulu one day, Delulu always. From the moment Olafemi asked her to be his girlfriend, Makina felt like her dreams had come true. Day after day, he sent her flowers, wrote captions like, "My everything," and posted sweet selfies of them together. Under each post, however, Olufemi's followers insulted Makina and her weight. Suddenly, some women started showing interest in him, leaving comments like, "How can such a hot guy date that cow?" Or, "She doesn't deserve him." But Olufemi never told them to stop. In fact, the engagement was boosting his fame, so he let the comments roll in. In private though, Olufemi's warmth faded. He barely held her hand, gave only brief kisses, and often sat distant and distracted. One evening, after a particularly affectionate live video, Makina leaned in to kiss him, but he pulled back, chuckling awkwardly. "I'm not big on the touchy stuff," he said, making her heart sink. She started to notice every romantic gesture seemed more for his followers than for her. His gifts and public affection made her feel special, until she realized it was all just a performance. When she tried to get closer to him physically, he would pull away saying, "Sorry, I'm waiting for marriage for that." Each time, her heart broke a little more. Yet, in her hopeful mindset, she convinced herself it would get better one day. But her friends and family were not stupid and saw through Olufemi's game. They tried to warn her that he was only using her for social media attention, but when they told her to leave him, she became defensive. "For once, I'm happy. Please leave me alone. You don't know Olufemi like I know him," she'd insist. Her love blinded her, and no one could change her mind. Months passed, and Olafemi tried making videos on his own, but they were all flopping. Only the ones featuring Makina managed to get views. Even then, the engagement started to decrease. People were probably tired of the constant ridicule. Olafemi knew he had to come up with something drastic to regain his popularity, and the idea he had next was beyond cruel. The idea struck him one evening while he was scrolling through his notifications. He saw a comment from a follower saying, "You should just marry her and make it a reality show." At first he laughed, dismissing it as a joke. But the more he thought about it, the more he saw its potential. Marriage was a bold move, something that would grab attention, stir up drama, and skyrocket his social media presence. It was extreme, yes, but that was exactly why it was perfect. He went out, bought the cheapest wedding ring he could find, and set up a surprise proposal on the beach. Olufemi's proposal was like a scene from a romantic movie, at least on the surface. He'd arranged for Makina to meet him at the beach, where he'd set up a beautiful display, fairy lights strung up along the sand, rose petals scattered around, and a small crowd of his friends ready with their phones to film the moment. As he got down on one knee with the ring, he recited a big, romantic speech, every word carefully crafted but entirely fake. For Makina, though, this was the proposal of her dreams. She cried with joy and nodded her yes. The crowd cheered, and he gave her a quick kiss, making sure it looked good for the camera. The next day, he posted the video online with a caption about finding his forever love, and it instantly went viral. But the comments were as harsh as ever. "He's going to marry the cow and have baby cows," one person commented. Another replied, "She doesn't need a ring, she needs a gastric band." Yet Olufemi didn't mind. In fact, the cruelty of the comments only boosted the post's reach, spreading the video further and fueling his popularity. When the cameras were off, Olufemi's warmth vanished. Makina was confused by his change in attitude, but she didn't care. Her dream of marrying him was finally coming true. The news of their engagement spread quickly, and soon everyone in their lives was talking about it. Makina's parents, however, weren't thrilled. They knew Olafemi well enough to sense something was off, and they'd seen how he treated her, using her for his own gain, showing little care or respect. Her friends felt the same way, each one warning her to reconsider and think carefully about what she was getting into. "Makina, he doesn't love you," her mother said gently one evening, trying to reason with her. "You've always been loyal to him, but loyalty isn't the same as love. He's using you, sweetheart. I can feel it." Her friends echoed her mother's concerns, pleading with her to see the reality of the situation. But Makina, blinded by love, dismissed their warnings. She was determined to follow her heart. To her, this was her moment, her chance to finally be with the man she'd loved for so long. The day of the wedding arrived, but the atmosphere was far from celebratory. Makina's parents attended, though they looked sad and worried. Her friends were there too, but their smiles were forced, each one masking a deeper concern. They wanted to support Makina, even if they couldn't support the choice she was making. Makina sat in her dressing room adjusting her veil, her heart a mix of excitement and nerves as she prepared for the biggest day of her life. Her best friend Zinzi was helping her when she suddenly remembered she'd left Makina's bouquet in another room. She went to find it, but as she approached the hallway, she heard Olafemi's voice, speaking with one of his friends. "I can't believe you're really marrying that girl," his friend said. Olafemi's reply was cold. "I don't want to. It's just for the views. She disgusts me." He laughed and went on, insulting Makina with casual cruelty. Stunned, Zinzi quickly pulled out her phone, recording the conversation. Heart pounding, she rushed back to Makina, her face pale. "Makina, don't marry him. Look," she whispered, showing her the video. Makina's world shattered as she watched, devastation clouding her joy. Despite Zinzi's pleading, Makina took a deep breath, forced a brave smile, and made her decision. She would still walk down the aisle. Makina walked slowly down the aisle, her face calm, but her heart heavy with the truth she had just learned. As she reached the altar, the officiant offered a warm, brief speech about love, commitment, and the journey of marriage. But she didn't really listen, her mind trying to decide if this was what she wanted. The officiant turned to Olafemi. "Do you, Olafemi, take Makina to be your lawfully wedded wife?" "Yes," Olafemi replied smoothly. The officiant turned to Makina. "And do you, Makina, take Olafemi as your husband?" Makina hesitated, her silence filling the room. Everyone held their breath. Olafemi started sweating. Zinzi thought, "Please say no, please say no, please." Her parents exchanged worried looks, each thinking, "Oh Lord, please inspire her to say no." The officiant repeated, "Makina, do you take Olafemi as your husband?" After a long pause, she whispered, "Yes." The guests gasped, disbelief rippling through the room. Olafemi was finally relieved. At their reception, he smiled for photos, hugged her, and looked every bit the loving groom. The followers saw the pictures, and they went viral. Olafemi had never had so many likes and comments on his social media, and unfortunately, those comments were mostly mean to Makina as usual. But as soon as the wedding was over and they were alone, his smile vanished, and he seemed almost annoyed. That first night, Makina had gone out of her way to make everything perfect. She'd prepared a small dinner for them, hoping they could share a quiet moment together. She waited for Olafemi to sit down, but he only looked at the food, took a few bites, and excused himself to go check his messages. She sat there alone, again crying. The worst was that he didn't sleep in the same bed as her. When she asked why, he said, "I snore, so I prefer sleeping in a separate room." Week after week, she tried her best to be the kind of wife she thought Olafemi wanted. She'd cook his favorite meals, clean up after him, and try to make their small home a warm, happy place. She hoped her love and care would reach him, that he'd see how much she was willing to give, and he'd respond with kindness. But Olafemi barely noticed her efforts. One day, Olafemi came home in a bad mood. He complained about the boring day he'd had and the fact that his followers were starting to lose interest. Without thinking, he set up his phone, pressing record as he walked into the kitchen, where Makina was cooking. "Hey everyone! Just came home to this amazing meal my lovely wife has made for me," Olafemi said, his voice suddenly cheerful and affectionate. Makina turned, surprised by his tone. He hadn't been this warm since their wedding day. As he moved closer to her, he wrapped an arm around her, smiling into the camera. Makina felt a flicker of hope. Maybe he was finally starting to care. But as soon as he ended the video, his smile faded. He let go of her, turning away and complaining about how he was exhausted. Makina stood there, watching him go to his room, leaving her alone with the meal she'd worked so hard to make. This pattern continued for weeks. Olafemi would only show affection when the camera was on. She felt as if she were living two lives, the one his followers saw, and the lonely, painful reality behind closed doors. One evening, Olafemi came down with a fever. Makina saw this as a chance to show him how much she cared. She stayed by his side, bringing him soup, adjusting his blankets, and making sure he was comfortable. When his fever broke, he didn't thank her. Instead, he went right back to checking his messages, more interested in his notifications than the woman who had spent hours tending to him. Makina felt her heart sink. She went to her room alone and cried. She had always dreamed of a perfect love story, a beautiful wedding, and a happy life. Now she was alone, her dreams shattered. That night she prayed, her heart heavy with sadness. "Dear God, I've never asked you for anything, but please make my disease disappear so that my husband can love me as much as I love him. I don't want to be obese anymore. Please." What Makina didn't know was that her prayer would be answered, and in ways she could never have imagined, beyond her expectations.
Hey Tale lovers, part 2 is on its way. If you enjoyed part 1, please give us a like and share your thoughts in the comments. Until next time, take care and keep the stories alive.